Guess I want to make this video because I enjoy discussions on topics related to video games. And I want to discuss Tectone's take on the crossover between Zenless Zone Zero and Street Fighter. I've seen the response videos that both Gacha Smack and Tectone have made on this, as well as the video of them talking things out. I want to clarify, this video is not an attack on Tectone. What I primarily wish to do is add something of value to the discussion. I'm not going to react or go into every point Tectone has made on the topic. I only want to focus specifically on one single point he made, and that is this one. My issue with this point is I think it's too simple and is only surface level. Before explaining why I think this, I want to first define what makes a game a gacha game, and why I think the genre of gacha games shouldn't be used in certain contexts when discussing video games. So, the definition of a gacha game is a video game that implements the gacha mechanic. That seems to be rather simple. There are other elements listed that are usually in gacha games, like stamina systems, in-game currencies, daily lock-ins, and so on. But the core thing seems to be that if the game has a gacha mechanic, it's a gacha game. This, to me, is too vague of a description when you're talking about something like video games that have many mechanics in them. Like, is Resident Evil 4 a gacha game? You gacha for charms with the coins you earn from the shooting gallery, but the core gameplay is a third-person shooter. Is Hollow Cure a gacha game? You gacha for characters just like any other game that is considered a gacha game. Those are two games that have very different gameplay, and I believe the majority of people, if not everyone, would not classify either of those games as gacha games, and in no way would have the same genre. What I believe people largely mean when they say a game is a gacha game is when the game has the combination of being able to spend real money and there being a gacha mechanic where the spending of that real money is contributed to or used in the gacha mechanic. Maybe throw FOMO and other psychological tricks to pressure players to spend money in there too, but that's largely what I believe people mean when they say a game is a gacha game. I think there being a specific genre of these kinds of games is fine for identification purposes of what type of monetization these games have, but the games themselves fall into different genres when you're looking at their core gameplay. I suppose you could also include some other mechanics to be expected, like the stamina system and the like, but it still has nothing to do with the core gameplay. So I think the category of gacha games is only applicable in very specific discussions on game design and player interests, mainly having to do with the game's monetization. So to get back to Tectone's point here, gacha game players like gacha games. This, to me, does not convey the same thing as fighting game players like fighting games. The genre of fighting games is defined with a clear core element of the game's gameplay and its design, while the genre of gacha games, as I've explained earlier, doesn't really. Someone mentions a fighting game and you can fairly accurately envision what the game itself is like if you know what the genre entails. If someone mentions a gacha game, what exactly are you going to envision of what the game is and its gameplay? You could probably envision there being other mechanics in the game, like daily quests and stamina systems, but is that just what the gacha game genre is? Like what kind of gameplay are you envisioning here? Now, I want to get to a question that I think needs to be answered. Now, I think I would be considered a gacha game player because I myself play games that are considered gacha games. I currently play 4, and I plan to try Zenless Zone Zero out when it releases, And I played several other gacha games, but have stopped because of a number of reasons I won't get into. Do I like gacha games? Well, I like the games that I play, but if you ask me if I like the gacha mechanic or other systems that are associated with gacha games, I would say no. So if I don't like the gacha mechanic or other mechanics that are usually associated with these games, which would be the main elements of what makes these games be considered gacha games, do I like gacha games then? That is the question to be answered when you have all this context with it. And now that we've gone through that, how many people would be considered gacha game players have the same viewpoint as myself? How many of us players like the games we play, but don't necessarily like the gacha mechanic that is in them? I believe most simply tolerate it, just like unskippable dialogue. Do we have a genre for unskippable dialogue? Thankfully not. I believe the gacha games we play would be better if they didn't have the gacha mechanic in them. I do understand that there is still an interest that can be derived from the gacha mechanic. However, it still doesn't define the core gameplay of the game. A game's genre is largely determined by what the gameplay is. So I questioned the accuracy of Tectone's point that gacha game players like gacha games. Well, I hope I've explained things well enough and presented something to think about. Honestly, I'd like to know if there is someone who likes gacha games specifically because of the gacha mechanic or perhaps other mechanics that are usually associated with these games. Perhaps I'm an outlier and unaware of the consensus of the majority, though I'm pretty sure I'm not, and I think most would agree with my take or viewpoint on gacha games. I felt like contributing to the discussion because I thought that Tectone's point was just too simple, and it left me questioning the validity of it. Plus, again, I like discussing video games. If you believe the information and my thought process on this topic is worth anything, feel free to share the video, as I'm not really a content creator and I doubt I'm in the algorithm. If you disagree, leave a comment as to why, and perhaps you can present something I overlooked. Thanks for listening. Also, Pure Games added Y-invert camera to Wuthering Waves with the 1.1 update, which is great because now I don't have to feel handicapped moving the camera on controller. It also works similarly to Star Rails, where the setting works for both controller and mouse. Like, there's a single setting and it applies to both control types. Would be better if they had separate settings for both, but, you know, it works. So, Toyo, specifically the Genshit team, why is there still no Y-invert for mouse? I hope at the very least Zenless Zone Zero has a Y-invert camera setting for the controller at launch. I'm going to be rather disappointed if there isn't.